Hello, everyone. Webinar. Got some music going on here. Thank
You
you.
go ahead. I'll start it again.
Oh, it's fine. No, you can. Yeah, we're just gonna let everyone kind of filter in and make sure that your chat is switched to. I think it's everyone now instead of all panelists and attendees. It's switch it to everyone. So Ethan's just gonna play a little bit of music here to kick things off.
Dang it, nothing ever works when you think you have it all right. Here we go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're gonna get going here. I know we'll still have some people filtering in. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Carrie Zenz with Allen Interactions, and this is 5 surefire ways to irresistible e-learning designs with our Chief Instructional Strategist, Ethan Edwards. Just want to make sure in your chat panel that you have it switched to everyone. Zoom has done an update, so now it's used to be all panelists and attendees, and now it's everyone. So then everyone can see your comments. And please share any insights, comments, questions you have as they come to you, and we'll be pausing throughout the next 45 minutes to address those questions. And before I turn things over here, I just want to share a little bit about Allen Interactions. Our mission is to enhance the human mind and spirit through meaningful, memorable, and motivational digital performance learning and technology solutions. Our everything is helping businesses optimize performance together. Ethan, we're so excited to have him here today. And as always, I mean, he's a treasure here at Allen. He's been doing this a really long time, like for I think more than 3 decades, and has a ton of an industry experience as a learning experience designer and developer. He is an internationally recognized speaker on instructional design for e-learning and experience design for learning. And he is also the primary instructor for Allen Academy's Allen Certified Instructional Professional Program, which is known as ACIP, and we'll talk about that more at the end. But now I'm going to really just turn things over to Ethan and let him get started.
Okay, well, thank you, Carrie. As always, it's a pleasure to spend time with people interested in good design. Speaking of how long I've been doing this, I have to laugh. I hope you're not having a cruel summer, as our lead-in music was, but I remember when I first started many, many years ago at Authorware, it was when Bananarama was popular. So that was like around 1990. And so that's a mark in my mind of I've been doing this a really long time. So anyway, what we're here today to do is just look real quickly at some ideas that, first off, something that's very well discussed and I think is sort of pointless from a design point of view, but it sort of permeates our world. And instead, I'm going to replace that with first a really brief reveal of our design approach, and then 5 strategies that I think are really useful to keep in mind as you're designing it, and they always will increase engagement. And as we said, they're sort of guaranteed, surefire ways that are going to make your e-learning designs more engaging and more interesting to your learners. And then, as always, I want to illustrate through some real examples. So we have a lot to do in our 45 minutes, but I do want to make sure we have time for questions. So type those, and I'll stop periodically and ask Carrie to lift up some of the ones that might be the most interesting and meaningful for the whole group. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing here. And first, I want to talk about, just real briefly, this theory of levels of interactivity. Whenever you talk about interactivity, inevitably, people start talking about this. And real briefly, things are divided into 4 levels of interactivity, based mainly on the technical complexity of what it is that people are doing. And so level 1 is, very linear, simple images, very simple questions. You maybe add drag and drop things, some more customization, and finally you get to these complex games. I just want to show you 2 examples and ask, do we think this even matters? And I think these are 2 examples that you would put at the opposite ends of the spectrum. The first one is close to a level 1 or a low level 2 interaction. I hate even saying that because, as you'll see, I don't think it makes much difference. And the next one is more of a high level game. So the first is, it's a little interaction that we did for a construction company, and one of the tasks was they hire day workers, and they need to know what they have to wear for certain tasks that are assigned. So here in this interaction, you have a worker. He's been assigned to a crew where he will be using a weed whacker on the shoulder of a 2-lane highway. And so we need to pick the PPE, the protective equipment that he's going to be needing. So I think he needs a hard hat, and I'll give him some ear protection and maybe some gloves. And I'll say, Pat's ready for work. Okay, well, I didn't get all of these right. I can try again. And I see that, okay, the hat was wrong. The ear protection and gloves were okay, but I need to get 3 more things. So what might those be? I'll give him some steel-toed boots. Oh, and he's on the highway, so that and a mask. Okay, I still didn't get them all quite right. So the mask wasn't right. Give him safety glasses. Okay, he's prepared for the safety on the job. So an exceptionally simple, but I think for the task and for the outcome, a really fitting interaction. Here's another interaction, and this is a game that is on the market and it's supposed to be able to teach lots of different concepts. And what you do is you have to fly this bird, and you can't really see it. I have to click the mouse to keep him flying. And when I start, words are going to come across the screen, and I need to hit words that are related to microlearning, and I need to avoid words that are not related to microlearning. So here we go. I'm clicking, click, click. Oh. Okay, click, 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 click. I missed boring. Oh, dang it. Okay. So anyway, I could keep doing this, and it really has an awful lot to do with my ability to, my reflexes and so forth. So what I want to say there is here we have pretty much a level 1 interaction, which generally people think is not that great, and level 4 interaction, which somehow we're supposed to think is really desirable. Well, in truth, The measuring about the complexity of the interaction is not at all anything to do with the learning or with actually what's appropriate for the learner and for engagement necessarily. I would claim that this first example is much more effective and actually much more engaging in that I'm thinking about things that I have some control over, as opposed to really focusing on skills that have very little to do with micro learning, but what I might be able to master as a designer, as a user of a computer. So, we can spend a lot more time analyzing that, but I just want to start out by sort of debunking this notion that somehow those levels of interactivity have anything to do with learning. And we need to stop putting that as our goals and think differently. And what we need to think of, it may be useful to think about how much something's going to cost to create or how much time a developer is going to use, but it really has very little to do with the relationship to learning. And what does is what we've used, and I've talked about often, and you probably have heard me say these words if you haven't heard me talk before, is that interactivity really depends on how the learner is challenged and brought into activity. And we have this model of instructional interactivity that we call CCAF, and it says that a good interaction has to have a meaningful context. It has to be challenging. You have to think about it. You need to do something, and you want to do something that has some relationship, or at least symbolically, if not physically, to the real world. And then you need feedback to help you do better. And I think you can see, even in that very simple case, that case of dressing Pat to be safe on the job, it provided a context that was literally what you do. These men were going to have to equip themselves to go work on these crews. And so it was a real meaningful context. The challenge was figure out what is the right stuff to wear. The activity is dressing the guy, which is what I will need to do on my own. And then the feedback showed what was right. So that's just a real quick thumbnail of what we mean by a good interaction. And of course, you can do that, and you'll see much more complex interactions that are also illustrating this CCAF model. But what I want to do today now, that's just a real quick lead in to what the real point of today is, which is to give you some really practical ways to, when you're creating a CCAF interaction, to really enhance it, to make it very clear and irresistible to your learners that they're going to be engaged, they're going to learn, they're going to do the right thing. And so these are the challenges that I always try to keep in mind as I'm working on a design. The first one, and what really impacts the learner, is how you tell a story. And you may think that's a weird thing to pull up as a characteristic of learning, but teaching and learning is all about communication and understanding. And one of the very best ways that we as humans communicate is by creating the sense of story. In a story, something happens, we get carried along, as opposed to just information, which is disjointed and doesn't help you move from one page to another, or doesn't necessarily, it isn't impossible, but it doesn't give you assistance in making it easier to remember and pay attention. And so I don't mean that you should, have a storybook online, but as you give content, think about the narrative flow and the things that make people think they're in a story, or that things are really happening, is having people with names, having characters, having a conflict that you start with up front. Let people know this is a challenge. This is what our field is challenged by, and then resolve that. Those are all issues. And so I want to show what I mean by that. This is some work we did for Mary Kay University. They have a lot of beauty consultants who are at different levels of expertise, and they actually have very different goals. And they needed to have in their university a way to address all of those different sorts of learners into understanding these really well thought out principles that they have developed over the years and are at the root of their success. So this is just one of the modules out of many, and this is about dealing with how you book a selling appointment. And you can imagine a non-story version of this would, give the rules of what are the steps to do, and this is best practice. And what they did instead is they start with a video that really encourage.
How many times have you put your finger in that dial to call a hostess? You feared doing it. But once you did it, close your eyes, grit your teeth, and dial that number, and you say, I've been thinking about you this morning. Is there any reason why you would like to have a beauty show? And somebody says, yes, I'll have one. Oh, wow, you can't wait to get your finger back in that dial. That's the way it works. Success is many times just around the corner.
Okay, well, that continues on with some more additional background information. But even that little bit, you could tell what a masterful storyteller Mary Kay was, and putting in the words of people, and even in that video it does it. But then later on, when we go further into this module, I'll come to this one section here about how to actually overcome booking objections. And it starts, overcoming objections can be a challenge, and learning to handle them smoothly takes practice. In this activity, you'll practice using the CARE formula to overcome the most common booking objections. So I can click that button to see what am I supposed to do. These letters stand for steps. I'm supposed to check to make sure I understand it, acknowledge the person's objection, respond to it with an honest response, and then E, expectantly wait for a response and see how it goes. So we're going to put that into place, but we're actually going to get into a little story about my friend. And I could say, what objection is she going to bring to my having asked her to do a makeup demonstration? And I'm going to say, she says, I don't wear makeup. So, sorry, Cindy, I don't like to wear makeup. And I have to have a conversation. Is it because you are allergic to makeup, or because you just don't like to wear it? Or I did notice that you don't wear makeup, or so you just like the natural look, correct? Well, I'm supposed to check. So I think the first one is the best checking option. And then Michelle says, I just don't like to wear it. Okay, I see, you look great without makeup. Or couldn't I convince you to get together with me to try a new look? Or I could really use your help. I'm going to plead with her because she's a good friend. And she says, I'm sorry, Cindy, I'm sure there are other people who'd be thrilled to try a new look. And so, again, it's practicing this, but it isn't so much this has to be an accurate simulation or anything, but it's enough to get me engaged and really see, I could see myself in this picture. I can understand how people operate and how my responses change. So I have to come back and try to do this better. She says, I don't like to wear it, and then I'm going to acknowledge that. That's what I should have done. I'll see, you really look great without makeup. And then she's happier. And then I'm going to say, I respect and honor the fact that you do not like to wear makeup, Michelle. But may I ask you to just help me practice applying some looks? Then when we're done, you can wash it off. You'd really be helping me out. So that's the honest response, listening to what she said, the R. So let me do that. And she says, okay, I guess I can help you practice. And then I get the feedback that listening helps you connect with your customers and it builds trust. But again, it's not about what my focus is on the story of I can imagine myself in this scene and doing it, more so than having the rules up front, although the rules are certainly at the core of this. And then finally, this ends with a really confirmation video that drives in the point. So
the thing that you need to understand when you're overcoming an objection is that you don't fight with what they're trying to say. If you notice, what I did was I used what Michelle said. I don't wear makeup. Now I'm going to take that as part of the deal. She doesn't wear makeup. I'm going to use she doesn't wear makeup. I'm not going to say to her, well, you should wear makeup. Well, why don't you wear makeup? Well, makeup is amazing. That doesn't overcome the objection, okay? You want to work with what the person says and still make it be okay.
So So tell a story that commands your attention. And I think that's a really good example, but it's sort of easy, you can say, because, well, sure, you're a salesperson, you're always talking to people. So it's pretty easy to bring story elements in. And maybe that's true, but I think this is a really important point to bring, even when you're doing other things like technical training, even software training. It makes such a difference if the skills that you're trying to teach in the system are tied together by some intention. It's not just, here's a list of the skills you need to know in the software, but instead, here's a day of us doing our work, and look at all these, and here's a number of times that the ability to do certain things in our system comes up. Not because the system's so important, but because life is important. And that is something that really engages learners and makes what you're building much more manageable and memorable. So that's the first one. Carrie, I want to stop before too long to see if there's any questions that have come up yet that I should address.
Hi. Yeah, a couple questions. So it was kind of back to before you showed this example.
Yeah.
They wanted to know how to create that first interactive activity that you did with the safety, the PPE safety gear. And then there was a question about what that micro-learning game was built in, if you knew.
Okay, well, I don't know what the micro-learning game was built in. I think it was just programmed.
Okay.
Because we didn't do that, but I found it on the web as an example that was put out there as a really good learning example. Yeah. But the first one, it didn't look like a multiple choice question, but all that first one was built in Storyline using no special features. It was just objects that are being selected, and you were having to pick. It's just a little logic check to see which ones did you pick. And if you pick the wrong ones, they get turned off with the little not symbol. And then you just keep doing it until you get all the ones selected. So it's actually, even though it looks like something special, it really is the most basic level of interactivity there is. It's just clicking on objects, and you got to click the right combination of them. Just like it's essentially a multiple selection question, which is at the base of most authoring tool paradigms.
Yeah, and Paul actually said, looking at those two items, you could easily build them in Lectora, Domino, One, Storyline, or Captivate.
Right, that first one could be written. If an authoring tool can't do that, it has no business being identified as an authoring tool. It'd be hard to do that in in PowerPoint and get really special feedback, but I don't really consider PowerPoint as an authoring tool, even though I think a lot of people try to use it as one.
Right. And then the only other question was, and then just the only other question that came up, people thought the Mary Kay example was really cool. And then I addressed that was built in the HTML5 framework that we have. It's called AR5 here at Allen Interactions.
Yeah. And as you can see, I didn't point it out, but I was showing it on a laptop screen. But from this little slide, it's responsive, and so it runs completely on a phone and so forth. Yeah. And that's why its visual presence is a little more flexible. But you can see that it doesn't really impact the convincingness of feeling like I'm having this conversation, and the integration of the video and all those things together. So. Okay, so the first thing is tell a story that commands the learner's attention. And if you're not interested, there's no chance that your learner is going to be interested. And that's a big problem. So number two is, again, I think people go about thinking, I have to write questions that are going to test the learner. And I think that's the wrong way to think about interactivity. Interactivity creates experiences that the learner remembers, engages in, and stays with them. Very rarely do you remember questions unless you are mad about that it was written poorly. I mean, really, those are the questions anybody remembers are bad questions. But that isn't the point of interactivity. There could be a point of evaluation at the end of a lesson or at different points. But like these knowledge checks that are so pervasive, I'm all in favor of having interactivity throughout the piece, but those don't need to be test questions. They need to be ways that are going to let the learner explore and engage and make sure that they understand what has been presented. So here's an excerpt from a piece we did for, what happened to it? Let me get it open real quick. My bookmark failed me. This was some training for an academy of learning about the house trades, air conditioning, plumbing, electricity, because those skills are actually being not taught as much as they should be. And so contractors are having a harder time getting qualified people. And so this academy is really providing this as sort of an apprenticeship to qualify people. So the one I'm going to show you here is about how do you identify leaks in an air conditioning system. So there's a little story, poor Adaya, her AC isn't cooling the way it should. And you're at her service call on her home and you tested the refrigerant charge on her cooling system and determined it had a low charge. And this means there's probably a leak. And so your task is to find it. And poor Adaya, I'm melting. Why is it so hot? It's a cruel summer for her, I guess. So anyway, it talks about our leak detection tools so that we can have this detector and we can use a solution that's going to create bubbles. And it says just a little bit of some tips for how you do the testing, but very quickly we're going to be practicing how to use this detector. Now this isn't testing me, can you do it? It's providing me a really useful tool to interact. It's going to give feedback, it's going to give all sorts of things, but it's not to prove that I don't know it or to prove that I do. It's to help me figure out to be better at using this. So I can get my tool and then I can drag it around and I'm supposed to check inside and hopefully find where there's a leak. And notice when I move the wand down here, the lights light up on my detector. And so I know that's a place where there's going to be a leak. So I'm going to click there. And so I found one, and I think there's supposed to be another. I need to keep checking to see if there's other leaks around here. But this is not, it's this, what I'm doing right now is looking around is as important as whether I find it. Okay, here I found another one. And I think I got them all. I'm going to come back here and I'm done testing. And I got great detection work. You found some leaks, however, you're not done yet. That was only one part of the system. And so it goes on then and has you use the liquid to put some soapy stuff there on what I thought were leaks, and that would help identify where some bubbles are coming out. But so that's an interaction that I don't think is a test interaction at all. It's actually just working my way through the content, but it's interactive to make progress as opposed to just hitting the next button or by asking an irritating question that doesn't actually help me learn too much. So when you think about your interactions, don't automatically think I'm writing a right and wrong judged question. First, think about what interaction could I create that's going to let people think. So even that addressing Pat wasn't so much about getting it right, but letting me think about and have a concrete way to make those choices known and think about, well, would he need a hat here or not? And so you want that experience to be primary, not the judging part of it. A third one is, and this is sort of counterintuitive, I think, but it's really important, is that your learning is going to be much better if you require significant thought on the learner's part to make progress. And I have to say this is something I really have learned over the years, because I used to think at first, well, you don't want to make things too hard because then people won't like it. Well, things have to be as hard as they need to be. You're not doing a service to make it easier in the training, and then you're not going to be prepared for the work expected of you. And I think the difference is fairness rather than hardness. Things need to be achievable. They need to be done in a way that takes everybody's abilities into account, and that doesn't unnecessarily punish you. But it can still be challenging, and that you have to apply yourself, because if you can do something thoughtlessly, there's going to be very little benefit from it. So the little example of that I want to show is some work we did for AARP. And they were helping people try to get back in, resources to get them back into the work world. And this was just actually one of the most thoughtful ways. I've seen a lot of things about how you're supposed to write better resumes and so forth. And you read them and you go through the training and you end up sort of not knowing what you're really doing wrong. So in this, it's set up.
In the next 5 minutes, you'll be calling all the shots to bring a resume from SAD to FAB using our patented Find It, Fix It, Flaunt It technology. Making these changes will help your resume stand out in any industry.
Yeah, so this is done sort of for their public website, and they have a lot of, popular sort of fun elements to try to bring you in. But I think once you get in here, what keeps you going and what interests it is actually what they're asking you to do. So you can apply for a job, and we're going to have to look at a resume and try to fix it. And so there's a healthcare job, there's an IT job. We'll apply for the IT job.
Okay, let's find it.
And so there's 7 items on this resume that we need to review, and 5 of them have a problem, and we need to find those. So first off, we have the job description that we could read, and you can see that it's quite detailed, that we can find all the things about that they're looking for. And so we're not going to have time to do it in this demo, but you actually have to read it pretty carefully, because they're going to test whether you're using wording for the job description uses, if you're revealing the right kind of characteristics and so forth. So here's the resume, and I can look through it, and these places that have dotted circles are potentially, well, there's 7 of them, and we know that 5 of them ought to be corrected. So here's able to establish priorities and meet deadlines. That seems sort of vague to me, so I'm going to say we should change.
How you gonna fix it?
And so then these are the 4 options that I could do to change it. I could choose a more relevant fact. I could change the language to match that of the job posting. I could list the duties I performed, or I could say, I think this is not a problem. I think, I didn't read it, but I'm going to say this isn't matching the language of the job posting, so I'm going to change it to that. And so it gets changed to demonstrated track record of established priorities and meeting deadlines. Okay. And I'm just going to real quickly do these, but there's proven skills in developing and managing projects.
Okay, let's fix it.
Actually, I think that one's okay, so I'm going to leave that one. This one, I think.
Ready to fix it?
I need to quantify my accomplishments. It's not saying specifically what I did. And let's see, this one.
How you gonna fix it?
I'm going to quantify again. And then it gives you a chance
Okay,
to add
let's
something
fix it.
there. And I'm going to add volunteer experiences that were not listed. And I got to do one more.
Ready to fix it? You've made some changes. Now, let's see how you did.
Okay, so I could go and change more, but I'm going to say these are good changes.
Fingers crossed.
So I can send it. Oh, wow. I actually did okay. Tell me why I did that. I did this before, and so subconsciously I knew what the good answers were. But I used relevant keywords. I explained my accomplishments. I quantified, and I did volunteer experiences. And here's what the winning resume looked like. But that kind of exercise that can be done like So, so requiring significant thought to make progress is, if it's a authentic and valid task, it actually raises the investment from the learner, because you just think harder about things, and that's a reward to us as a learner. Carrie, any other comment? We've got through the three, and I've got
Yes.
2 more to go. What questions?
Two more to go. There's a couple questions. One from Joe. He asks, you have shown excellent and cool examples. How can you create compelling content when your clients want you to simply convert an existing PowerPoint or create new e-learning in 1 month?
Well, you still have to do exactly what I'm saying with CCAF and think how to use these things, but you can do them much more simply than the example I just worked at, because as we saw, that first example I showed could be built in about an hour and a half. I built it yesterday, but there's 2 things to deal with that. One is, part of your goal is that the definition of this is how much time we're going to spend, which is often, and to create this, which is often made without any regard to the actual task at hand, is something that I would recommend that you try to start a dialogue about with, because people can say you have 1 week to do this, to produce this training, and you wonder, well, where in the world did somebody get the idea that that was even a remotely possible challenge? It came from business decisions that are completely ignorant about training. And so if we're going to live within that world, I think we're resigned to having really bad training. And so some of that stuff has to be questioned. But I also know that there are some reasons why these people need to be trained in 2 weeks. And so we have to have something. And so there is a balance. But I do think we do a huge disservice to training and to our learners when we work so agreeably within standards that couldn't possibly be developed with any awareness of what it requires to even create the simplest of e-learning. And so if you have an organization that is just dead set on that without ever even thinking about what is reasonable, that's a big challenge. But I do think once you start doing some CCAF sort of interaction, it's different. It's not longer, but it's just a different way of responding to those challenges. Yeah, Carrie, another thing.
Yep, and the other one was from Will, and he just wanted to know how much expert knowledge on a subject or topic do you feel you need before you can design impactful learning experiences?
That's a question that has been around forever, and you'll find different answers. Me personally, I don't know how to train something without becoming a master of it, at least at the level that you're expecting your learners to be at. Because to come up with authentic challenges, you have to understand, well, what is hard about this? What do you have to do? How do you succeed? And I don't know how to do that without actually learning it yourself. And so I know there are people that claim that, no, you don't have to do that. I'm not one of them. And because I do think you have to at least know the content at the level that you are writing about it and that you are challenging the learner to perform about it. You don't have the burden of having to become an expert that you're going to go do it, which is actually another level of expertise. But at least for those moments while you're designing, I find you have to have pretty good knowledge to be able to ask the right questions and create the right challenges. Okay?
Great.
Okay, we got a couple more to get here. Another one is consequences. The consequences often are the most important thing to teach, to communicate. I think too often we spend time crafting the perfect laying out of material before you ever get the learner doing something, wordsmithing your content. And unfortunately, an awful lot of learners don't pay any attention to that. They read through it quickly or they skip through it. And without activities, it's very hard to create personal meaning. Once you have somebody do something, they're much more equipped to take real meaning from it. This one is going to take just a second to to load. But this was a course that taught people how to be better bus drivers, if you can believe.
You should plan to take about 20. Welcome to Railroad Safety for Professional School Bus.
Again, I'm going to get
As you move through this course,
right the meat of this. And what it is there's some introduction stuff, a little bit about what are these 6 rules. But in order to learn,
welcome to your first route. This route consists of 3 active simulations. In the simulations, you will be driving the bus.
I am driving a school bus, and I have to be sure that I can cross railroad crossings safely. I see here's one coming up. I need to slow down. There's a stop sign, so I'm going to have to stop. I can turn on my warning lights. I'm going to try to stop here. Up. It wasn't just that I didn't stop soon enough. It was that I really put myself in jeopardy. And if I had students loaded, and the consequences of it is getting a ticket from which you could lose your license. And so I had to go back and do this again. This time, make sure that I don't make those I'll turn my hazard lights on. I'm going to start slowing down. I can't stop too soon because then I won't be able to look the right way. Come on. Oh, well, I don't know. My clicking isn't working. But in this lesson, you continue. They get progressively more difficult. The bus gets loaded with kids who are acting up, and they're a distraction, and so you got to make sure that they're calm. You have to look both ways at the train once you're stopped. You have to roll down your windows and so forth. But for all of those things, your feedback is not so much that was the right thing to do, but these are the consequences of you following all the rules. And that is so compelling as a way to bring people into the situation, that they get invested in doing the right choices. And so even, like if you, again, people hold up software training or things as some of the most tedious and routine things we have to build around. Even there, the consequences aren't that you clicked on the wrong field. It might be that, okay, now somebody's going to get the completely wrong payout in your insurance system, or you're going to have this much more work to be done, or anything. And so tying it to what the consequences of what you're doing creates a lot more significance. And then our last point is, really connect with something authentic in the learner. I think too often we're, as designers, are concerned about what the subject matter experts value and believe. And they have a very, very different perspective than somebody who has yet to master this content. And so you really need to think about, well, how is a new learner thinking about this, getting into their shoes and putting it in that perspective. This is a piece that actually literally puts you in the shoes, but it's trying to help you get a better feel for, it's one of a series of performance sort of training to help you be a better, more productive worker working with your coworkers. So I'm going to go ahead and play this, and it's well, you'll see how it is. I'm going to this job interview, and I come across says I could leave it, or I could say I'm late. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it. Okay, let's rewind, and I'm going to go ahead and fix it this time. I'm getting into my appointment.
Hi, good morning. It looks like you have a meeting with Charla. Charla, your guest is here.
Hey, it's you again. Thanks for straightening the mat earlier. If you hadn't done that, someone might have tripped. I like people who take ownership. Oh, shall we? I'm thrilled you're joining the marketing team. In case you don't know, we've missed our sales targets for the past 2 quarters, and this quarter is looking even worse. But I think you could help us turn this around. Ready to meet the team? Hey, everyone. Meet our new team member. I think a fresh perspective will really help us close the gap on those sales numbers we're behind on.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Maybe you can help us with the reality that our CEO wants us to sell products that our customers don't want to buy.
Yeah, we're struggling to meet our numbers, and senior leadership isn't really providing a lot of help.
Welcome.
You're starting to see what we're up against. Do you think you can help us move the needle here?
Okay, well, you get the idea of what's going on there. It continues on, and you have a chance to actually leave. And if you do, you meet somebody in the elevator and you find out you just lost a really great opportunity. But you can try to, it's asking you how you can help this team, which you can see is pretty dysfunctional. But I think it really recognizes some of the questions that a learner has rather than the questions that you want them to have. And it's really just thinking, well, what would be a real communication topic and way of putting yourself in the learner's perspective and communicating to that rather than what you think they should be or what the SMEs think they should be thinking about. Okay, so our interactivity, CCAF, and as you do that, these strategies, always think about telling a story. Think about how you're driving the learner's attention. Try not to think so hard about writing a question, but creating a challenging experience. Don't be too quick to not hold your learner accountable. That thought is important, and people respect when you respect them. Consequences are really the most important thing that you can communicate, and those happen after the learner acts, not before. And I think too often designers focus on what they're going to tell before the learner has done anything. That's not dependent on anything. Those are not consequences. We care about the effect of our actions. And then finally, really try to connect with something is authentic in the learner. This is harder the more diverse your audience is, but you can find things that are much more relative to being a human, an interesting human being challenged to do a task, than to just be focused on what's the content, what are the facts we're dealing with. So I just showed these last 2 slides. I know we're at time, but then I'll stick around for some more questions. If you like this sort of thinking, just know that there is a ebook that's about motivation. It's sort of about some of these same topics. It overlaps quite a bit that I wrote a little while ago, and you can download that if you want to have something to work with. Also, if you're really more interested in spending more time thinking how you can become a master of CCAF, the Allen Academy has a whole curriculum to be a certified instructional professional in the world of e-learning. You don't have to take the whole thing. You might want to, but the very first course of that is we call Design 100. And we spend a lot more time looking at some of these fundamentals of design. And one's starting up very soon on September 14th. So that might be something you could look at. And you can get more information there on our website. And then hopefully you know that we are a full service organization, that we will help you if, we always have been dedicated to training and spreading knowledge, but we also know that sometimes it helps to have external support. And so we have very great consultants that will do digital engineering, the academy, doing custom learning and so forth. And so we're always happy to talk to you about the ways that we can help. And so that takes us to the end here in questions. And So Carrie, as we wrap up, what other final questions came up that you'd like me to respond to?
Well, there's just some comments. People thought the bus driver training was really cool. So I answered in there what that was built in. That was originally built in Flash, but rebuilt in HTML5. Talking about consequences. There was a question about, from Billy, if it looks like a learner is stuck, how long, like timer attempts, would you recommend waiting before providing a hint, or stopping and providing corrective feedback, or sending the learner back to review the associated content?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's sort of where the art of doing this comes in. It depends. If it's a task that you can sort of figure, that has the potential of being figure outable, that is, by doing it and getting feedback, and I can think, oh, what if I try this way? Then I'm more likely to let them go longer. If it's a matter of knowledge that they're not going to have any other chance of getting, you're not going to really benefit by letting them keep struggling. And so the closer it is to being basic concepts or just information, then I tend to stop earlier. Another piece, though, is whenever you can, let the learner have the choice. So oftentimes we'll have the button, they have to get it done. The standard is you can't move forward until you solve this, but have a button that isn't a give up button, but say, hey, give me some more help. And so it's up to the learner to decide, I want to really challenge myself, or, hey, I need, I'm feeling stuck and I need some assistance. But, I think once you're past 3 or 4 attempts, unless it's really complex and there's many ways to solve it, I think you're in dangerous territory of somebody getting too frustrated.
And then there's a question from Felicia that just came in. I work with some colleagues who think creating simulations that say click here is a great learning experience. How do I convince them that this is not the best learning experience?
Well, I don't know how to convince them, but you're absolutely right. And the fact that if the simulation is built in a way that the instructions are click here, that's not simulating reality. That's just leading you by the nose through a process. And so I think the discussion you have to have is to get people to realize, what is the learner actually thinking about? And to what degree is this simulation getting them to think about issues that go beyond this lesson? And click here doesn't have any transferability. And so, just thinking about how you can change those. And part of the thing is giving the task more in relationship to the real world. Like, instead of click here, pull up the record of the most recent library user or something, something that would be relevant. And so the prompt is something different. Your help, if they're stuck, can be, well, you're going to have to click here, or they can ask for that. But their basic goal and the challenge shouldn't be about the lesson. It should be about the task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Barbara also commented that make an example of a good learning experience, and you could use that and present it to them. So
yeah. Once people
doing it, you want to do it this way, but what about this? Show the difference, the difference in approach.
Right. One of the biggest problems is that so many people who are making decisions about training have never seen good e-learning. Mm-hmm. And so you just sort of assume, well, this is what it is. And once you see the possibility of, it doesn't have to be that way. Even something as simple as, you mean you could dress Pat for his job? It's sort of eye-opening. And right. That really changes the whole equation.
There's been a lot of questions, and there's been some conversation around 508 and accessibility. And you had written you've written a big one article that we're working on getting up. So we'll share that with everybody once we get that up. Ethan wrote a really long piece on that, and I think it answers a lot of questions and provide your perspective on it.
Right, and the other basic thing about that is your first step is to put yourself in the learner's shoes. Again, too often we respond to 508 compliance by saying, well, technically this will do it. You know, this is going to put the words on the screen, or this is going to give a narration, without realizing that's not actually going to help anybody. Those are components, but it has to be about what is the experience for a person with some limitations going to be that they're going to feel satisfied with. Okay.
Well, I think we're
Call it good there.
I think we're good here. Some people didn't love the design and stuff with the resume when you showed, but I think that's preferences and what the client wanted and things like that. So
yeah, it won a number of awards, and again, yeah, I'd love to talk to you more about that. And the proof is in the user, so
right,
if that works or not. I know it's a hard task, and I think it's the first effort I've seen that actually gets you working at the level you need to as a writer of a resume.
Right.
And so that's the challenge there.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this little period of time. We always do more webinars. So hopefully you'll be open to as you get notices. I love doing them. I love connecting with people. And so we're always open for contact.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ethan. People really took a lot away from this today. So even people that have heard you speak many, many times still took something new away, which is wonderful. So we'll share all of the resources that we shared in the chat today. And there's a couple of case studies. We'll share the ebook link again that we shared on the 6 steps to motivational e-learning. There's the 4 pillars. The CCAF framework, I know some people found that really valuable today when you touched on that. So we'll be sharing all that in a follow-up email coming out in the next couple of days, and then it'll have the recording link as well. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Rich and Claire, for your back channel support. And have a great day, everybody.